Hello and welcome to the channel. In this video I want to take a look at the type of knight that existed around the period we've covered so far. It's around this time, the turn of the 15th century, that professional contract-based systems began to slowly start replacing the previous feudal-based systems throughout Europe. Far from being a leftover from the old feudal system, the knight was very much a part of this evolution and took the form as something of a subcontractor, taking a contract from a lord, king or state and in turn contracting soldiers into his own service. This system has become known as bastard feudalism, and it was to have a great effect in the new century ahead of it, the knight playing an integral role. It was during this period that what we think of the knighters really came to be, and a lot of this is in part due to the type of armour they were wearing. From about 1300, armour creating techniques improved dramatically, and pieces of plate armour began appearing on parts of the knight's body. Plate was essentially sheets of metal sculpted and forged to the user's body, making it an exoskeleton around the man beneath. By the late 1300s, a knight could be covered from head to foot in plate, with only a few areas protected only by mail or cloth. We'll begin by looking at what the knight wore underneath. The first thing he would put on would be an acqueton, layers of cloth or linen stitched together to create a padding, sometimes also called a gambeson or an arming doublet. Although it may not appear so at first, this was actually very effective armour and could protect against cuts and slashes quite well. Over this would usually be worn a layer of mail, though as time continued the mail would increasingly be stitched onto the acqueton itself. On top of the mail came the plate armour itself, articulated and giving the knight his distinctive look. During this time, the main chest protection typically fell into two rough categories: coat of plates or a cuirass. The coat of plate was, as the name implies, pieces of plate held together by a canvas, which could be of a variety of materials, such as velvet or leather. The cuirass was made out of two large pieces of plate armour, which overlapped. The coat of plates is said to have provided a degree more flexibility, but the cuirass provided more rigidity, which was good against a heavy force. The variation in arm and leg armour was usually only cosmetic, with the exception of the armour on the upper leg. Depending on whether the knight intended to fight mounted or dismounted would affect the configuration the knight wore here. The helmet by this period was usually of the bassinet style. A tall helmet with a pointed crown, it was usually fixed to a long mail neck protection called an aventail. The main variation on helmets of this time was in the types of visors that could be worn. Some were long and pointed, usually called hound skulls, and others were flatter and more rounded. In some cases the knight would go without a visor altogether. Knights would sometimes wear over their armour various types of coat which could display their heraldry and badge, and sometimes simply some colours. They went by various names such as jupons, tabards, jacks, or simply as coats. With the evolution of plate armour, the knight could wear his protection instead of carrying it, and so the shield began to slowly fade out of priority, and the knight was able to begin wielding larger two-handed weapons when fighting on foot. These new two-handed pole weapons came in a variety of shapes and were used in the way the spear was traditionally used, with the spike on top being used to stab and thrust at the opponent. When necessary, the hammer or axe head could be used to cave in the armour of an opponent and deliver blunt force trauma to the man beneath. Hung from his belt, the knight continued to carry a sword, which itself had gone through an evolution. With a finer point and a thinner fuller, the sword had become more rigid, perfect for bypassing plate armour. And of course, when mounted, the knight continued to carry the lance, which, couched under his arm, could deliver a fatal strike to an enemy. Here are some examples of the types of knights you might see on the battlefield around this time. I got a lot of the ideas for the knights in my videos from Osprey's English Medieval Knight 1300 to 1400, as well as their campaign book Shrewsbury 1403. If you're interested in learning more about the period, I highly recommend getting both books. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video and found it informative. It was only a brief one, as I just wanted to lay the foundations for future videos about the knights that fought in the Wars of the Roses, in which I'll go into much greater detail. Like, subscribe and have a nice day.